Welcome back to the Richard Sherman podcast. Oh my God, upset alert. The Kansas City Chiefs at home at Arrowhead take a loss to Mitch's Detroit Lions. How you feeling, Mitchell?
I'm hot right now, Rich. I'm hot right now. The Detroit Lions, I called it. Let's not forget that.
You did.
I called it yesterday. The Lions snuck out a win in Arrowhead. Huge win. I'm going to try to keep my emotions tempered.
Don't.
Richard, they beat them without two of their three best players, without Chris Jones, without Travis Kelce, but they still went on the road to the defending champs stadium and beat the Kansas City Chiefs in dramatic fashion. Rich, I am fired up. This is not the same old Lions. This is a brand new version. And I you know what? But what I'm most fired up for is your thoughts, man, because I have been preaching the Honolulu Blue. I've been feeding you this blue Honolulu Blue Kool-Aid for the last year and a half on this podcast. And Richard, by God, I think we finally got something.
You got something. You're cooking with grease, Mitchell. You're talking about Amon-Ra St. Brown was having a really good game, had a really solid game, a touchdown, looked really in control. Reynolds was he was found gold out there, looked really comfortable. Jared Goff looked really good, especially in the first half, moving around in the pocket. That offensive line, which is one of the top 5 in the National Football League that they've been building for years, looked really good. Jamar Gibbs looked good. David Montgomery was out there getting it done, showing that he was worth the money that he got paid, and maybe he's worth a little bit more. They were getting the ball, but that defensively, Brian Branch, huge play, huge pick six. They were just playing with a different kind of confidence than you've seen in Detroit over the years. They believed they could win. You know, it was just like we were talking about with Deion in Colorado. Dan Campbell has those boys believing, has those boys feeling like they can go out there and conquer the world. So they went into Arrowhead Stadium against the defending champs and walked away with a victory. Now, I know Chris Jones wasn't playing. Travis Kelce was beat up, a little injured. But at the end of the day, it's football. The people that are out there are pros, and they got to get it done. They're still the defending champs, so you give them all the credit in the world. But it was also different, Patrick Mahomes. You know, Patrick Mahomes had to try to do more, had to try to make more magic happen, and he still gave him a shot. But Sky Moore and Valdez Scantling and Kadarius Toney, these aren't the guys that he's used to relying on. These aren't the guys that he's used to. He's used to at least having Travis out there like, hey, if everybody else is dropping passes, when it gets to crunch time, hey, Travis, go get open and I'll find you. And that's what Travis usually does. And without him, Travis's price might have went up. I mean, I know Chris Jones' price went up. Chris Jones, they had one sack without him. They had one sack and they were having a hard time. You know, they got a little bit of pressure on the quarterback, but they were having a hard time. They were having to bring blitzes and compromise coverage, and they were getting exposed at times. But wow, Mitchell.
I want to talk a little bit about Dan Campbell because you mentioned him. You said he had the guys fired up, and he's certainly changed the chemistry and the whole image of Detroit Lions football ever since he has arisen. He was all about biting those kneecaps, Rich. I mean, this guy played in the league for several years. He knows what it takes to be, part of a winning team, although he was a part of an 0-16 Detroit Lions team. Now, let's not forget that, but maybe he's carrying that chip on his shoulder, Rich. He came back to Detroit with one goal, and that's to flip the script, to change the image of Detroit. Richard, you've played with Pete Carroll, Kyle Shanahan. These are coaches that you really love playing for. They were players' coaches, right? I mean, something tells me you would like playing for Dan Campbell. What is it about a guy like Dan Campbell versus someone like Matt Patricia, who was before him? I mean,
we could ask Slay about that, but I think he humanizes it. He goes out there and he's on the battle lines with his men. You see the team doing up downs. You see Dan Campbell doing up downs. You see the team running extra. You see Dan Campbell out there. He makes sure that his team feels like that he's a part of the group. He's not above them. He's not below them. He's looking eye to eye with his men. And that commands a different kind of respect from your players. That allows them to see, hey, I want you to buy in, but I'm buying in too. And that's what Dan Campbell, he's injecting confidence and belief into these kids because he's telling them that we can conquer the world. They don't believe in us. and we can go do this. And they're going and doing it. Jared Goff is about to play himself into some money. This is the biggest win in Detroit in probably 3 or 4 years for the Detroit Lions. I mean, to go out there and beat the defending champs week 1, this fan base, these power rankings, Mitchell, we're talking about these power rankings. Mitchell, oh my God, the Detroit Lions, are they going to make it in the power rankings? We shall see. But I mean, you saw what they have. You saw the potential with Jamar Gibbs and his explosiveness, David Montgomery, the 1-2 punch there, Amon-Ra St. Brown, just Jared Goff in this system. It's week 1. You expect there to be some rust defensively. You saw what Sutton brings. You saw everybody. You saw flashes of all their draft picks. Like you were saying before we got on the show, you saw all of them making impacts. You saw the draft picks from last year making huge impacts. So they're really built for success. They're a young team, and they're hungry.
Well, it's cool to see the vision come to life, Rich. I mean, we talked about it last podcast. The Lions were widely criticized for their draft selections on day 1, but with Jamar Gibbs, this running back market is becoming a very interesting one. But they go early with Jamar Gibbs and they draft a middle linebacker. I mean, these are 2 positions that typically don't go, high, mid, first round, but the Lions went unconventional and did it. And then they picked up Sam Laporta, the tight end, and Brian Branch in the 2nd round. We saw all 4 players make huge plays today. I mean, you already hit on it. Brian Branch, pick 6. Jahmyr Gibbs looks like he could be something special, Rich. I mean, the kid's electric. He's got a good first step. He's slippery. He's good in the open field. He can catch the ball. And Jack Campbell. I mean, he's kind of looking, I don't want to be an emotional, fired up Detroit Lions fan, but he's got some Brian Urlacher vibes to him. He's good in coverage. He's long, he's lengthy. He can cover the field. He's hard nosed. And then obviously Sam Laporta. I mean, it's another Iowa guy. He's got, and again, I don't want to go too far, but he's got some George Kittle in him, another Iowa guy. He's tough with the ball in his hands, Rich. And it's good to see that vision come to life. But Richard, I want to get a little bit deeper into the game. You played this game for several years, and we were texting throughout the game, and Chris Collinsworth and Al Michaels were talking about it throughout the game. Juwan Taylor, the right tackle, correct, for the Kansas City Chiefs, had some funky technique going on. He was lining up a little bit further away from the ball than we expect to see a tackle, and he was constantly shifting his right leg, which, I mean, to be honest with you, you've seen these games in prime time. They're zooming in on things you don't typically zoom in on, but it looked like it was false start every single time.
Mitchell, this game is designed for the offense. You saw Lane Johnson do it in the playoffs last year against the Niners and against the Chiefs in the Super Bowl. That's just the technique they use. They get away with it. They say it doesn't count until they break they got to come off their front foot. So even when they're going back, until their front foot moves, it doesn't count as offside. So when they got him for offsides, it was because his front foot moved. But they get they're sticklers for that rule book with this, and that's what Juwan Taylor was doing. He was learning from what Lane Johnson did last year in the playoffs, and they get a jump. And is it fair to the defense? No, but none of it's fair to the defense. I mean, we can go through line by line through the rule book and be like, well, that seems biased. That seems slanted to the offense. That seems slanted to the offense, but they want these quarterbacks protected. So they're not going to put a rule in that doesn't allow the offensive linemen who are tasked to protect them make their job harder. And so you see Trent Williams do it a little bit. He's a little more disciplined, but guys do it. And Lane Johnson is one of the top tackles in the National Football League in the All-Pro last season. And if he's doing it, you're going to see more guys doing it because, hey, he's doing it and doing it well. I need to find a way to get that kind of edge. So that's what he's doing. But this loss, I don't know. It just feels odd. The pick 6 by Patrick Mahomes was uncharacteristic. He could have threw a number of other interceptions, but, like we were in a text, he threw one deep ball to Valdez-Scantling that looked like it was intercepted. And you look up and you're like, oh, he caught that. Oh, okay. Well, yeah. Oh, great job, Patrick Mahomes. That's your magic. But these windows are getting tighter and tighter, and it's not the same as it used to be when Travis is out there. Travis, commands a ton of attention. And the same with the defense. You're not seeing the defense be as disruptive without Chris Jones. He made his case. He sat in the stands and said, hey, this is why you need me. This is the difference. I make the difference on this defense. And he's totally telling the truth. Without him on the field, they got 1 sack. And with him on the field, I want to say he would have had a much bigger impact. They would have had 3 or 4 sacks. And when those crucial situations came around, he would have been making the plays. He made the plays in the Super Bowl when we played him. He got his hands up, batted passes down. He made huge plays down the stretch. And when you don't have a big-time playmaker like that and you're not paying him his money and he's not happy, you're going to suffer. So I'm sure the agent is coming back to the table calling the Chiefs like, hey, you get it now?
Well, Richard, a couple days ago, you predicted the Kansas City Chiefs to go to the Super Bowl and lose to the San Francisco 49ers. Obviously, they were playing a couple men down, and I would assume Travis Kelce would be back next week or the week thereafter. But does this loss change your perception of the Kansas City Chiefs at all? I mean, would you drop them off that Super Bowl line after seeing this performance today, or is that what you're sticking with?
No, I'm sticking with that. Because, I mean, it's a long season. You know, there's ups and downs of the season. You'll see that. They'll get healthier. You know, they're a dangerous team when they get in the playoffs. You know, anything's possible in the playoffs, but they're the most veteran team. They're a championship team. They have guys with multiple Super Bowl rings on their fingers still on that roster, and the quarterback being one of them, multiple-time Super Bowl MVP, multiple-time MVP, 5,000-yard pass. So I'm not counting Andy Reid and those boys out because of one game, but it's great for the Detroit Lions, and I'm excited for that fan base and excited to see what they're going to do this year.
Well, let's move into the Detroit Lions side of the ball. I mean, what's your perception now? I have tooted their horn for too long, and you've always been a little hesitant. The bandwagon is wide open, Rich. Are you going to be jumping on with me, or are you going to need to see another week against your Seattle Seahawks next week?
I want to say when we did our preview, I might have gave them the North.
You did give them the North.
Yeah, I gave them the North. So I'm still giving them the North, and I still think they have the playmakers. And then, you know, when they get Jameson Williams back, they'll have another dynamic playmaker that can stretch the field. I mean, I think the sky's the limit right now. They have to continue to develop defensively. There are some issues. They got to get a little bit more pass rush going. They have to get more pressure on the quarterback. These DBs are solid, but they got to get healthier. You know, obviously, E-Man has to get out there and be able to make an impact. They have great players, but if I'm the rest of the league, I'm concerned because these guys look confident. They're hungry, and they were streaking last year for a reason, and they look like they picked up where they left off.
Well, I love to hear that, Rich. I'm more excited for next week when you put them in your top 5 of your power ranks. That'll be a happy day for me, Richard.
You're trying to talk me into it, Mitchell.
You know I will. You know I will. This has been a spontaneous another one, Richard. We went back to back. We're going back to back.
Like Drake.
I guess what, Rich? We're going to be talking a lot more about the Lions going forward this year. I appreciate you guys all for joining us. I'll let Richard sign us off.
Appreciate you guys. Another episode of the Richard Sherman podcast. We'll see you Sunday night after these great games. Can't wait.